Registered with UNISA, started studying. UNISA starts early. So by the time it was end of February, I was already ahead.
Sure.
When the university opened, they realized I'm not there. And then the SRC, which is quite interesting, the SRC said, no, but where is this guy?
Sure.
They came to my house to ask for me from my parents.
Wow.
To say, no, we need this guy on campus, you know. So my parents said, oh, okay, it's fine, we'll release him. That he must do the same things, the same courses he did with UNISA. He mustn't go and register chemistry and whatever. He must go and register English, philosophy, Setswana, all the soft courses. So I agreed, I went back to university, the SRC negotiated for me. Because if you failed all the courses, you are expelled from the university.
Sure, sure.
They don't want you. There was a rule called Rule A19.
They
Fail everything you drop out.
I think they call it F7 now.
Yeah, no, I don't know what they call it now. The SRC negotiated that I should come back. So I went back, registered those courses, and I had a lot of time on my hands, so I was able to be part of student organizations. I was chairperson of this, that, the regional chairperson of the Anglican students, regional chairperson of young Christian students. I even ended up a head of International Anglican Youth Network, which was based in London and New York. And so I had enough time to do all those things because the academics were a walk in the park.
Yeah.
And that's really how I ended up being interested in media and so. So when I finished that first degree in English, basically, I went to do law at UWC. After finishing that law degree, I didn't find too much use for it. I went back to communications or English, if you like.
Sure.
By being a spokesperson of a minister, that's part of my job. And then from there, things sort of unraveled from there.
For sure, and then kind of took a life of its own.
Yes.
No, that's interesting. Did you always have a love for language?
Not really. Remember, it was like an accident to end up
Sure.
doing the languages because the chemistry did
Sure.
not
But after
materialize.
you passed now, like, so you're saying you went to law,
Yeah.
the decision to come back to communication.
Yeah. No, even that was an accident. I was just looking for any job. I finished degrees, and now I have to find a job.
Sure.
Right? And it just happened that the spokesman of the minister of constitutional development was overseas studying, and they're looking for somebody to temporarily hold the fort
Sure.
for 18 months. That's how I got into the job. They were looking for a temp. So I was a temp for 18 months and I never left after that. When the guy came back, he had to go and look for another job because I made such an impact in that 18 months that
Sure.
they didn't want him back. He
Yeah,
said, no,
interesting.
please go and look for something else. So I, made that work, and I rose very quickly through the ranks until I was head of communications for the Department of Environmental Affairs. I think it was back in 2000. I became a head of communication for the World Summit because that department was hosting the World Summit. So
Sure.
I had to take charge of that. It was quite interesting. In fact, that won me an award in government called the Government Communicator of the Year. From knowing nothing about communication to that.
Sure.
Remember, I didn't study communications at university. I only, I did
Just
law.
English, yeah.
So I left government after that. There was nothing else to do. Went to the private sector to become head of communications at the Chamber of Mines, and then went on to become head of communications at the South African Airways. It was just the biggest career move there. Very interesting. The airline industry is very interesting.
Sure. And how was that for you? So now moving from government, because everyone knows you to be back in the government space, or not necessarily government, I would rather say political, communicating on that side.
Yeah.
How was the switch to private?
To private. No, even private sector is a lot of politics, so it wasn't really different because my career was communications.
Sure.
More than the subject matter of whether it's an airline or mining or whatever the case was. So there wasn't really much of a difference, except that you need to understand what is the agenda of the organization for which you are communicating.
Sure.
So the Chamber of Mines happened to be an association of mines. So you're not communicating for any particular mine, you're communicating for the industry. Which was quite interesting because, you know, the industry at that time was under a lot of pressure to change, a lot of pressure to transform. It was during the era of what is called PE charters.
Yes.
So they were quite nervous about relating with government. So because I came from government, you know, part of the big job was to try and build bridges between the private sector and government. So that made the job very interesting.
For sure.
You know, I remember having to organize meetings with big ministers like Minister of Trade and Industry, Minister of Finance, get this ministers to come and talk to the CEOs of mines, getting the CEOs to go and address and present to government what their plans are. So that was quite interesting. Although it was a very short stint, that was quite an interesting stint.
What for me is interesting is when you say having to understand communicating the message or the agenda of a organization. How do you wrap your head around that? Like what are the challenges that you face when you have to face a new organization, understand that organization, and now communicate a message of that organization?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I don't even know where to begin there, but the issue is, if you understand your career is communications, not necessarily the subject matter.
Sure.
Right? The subject matter you will learn, and then you then, in a sense, apply your communication skills. So I knew nothing about airlines, but I went to the interview. They said, "Oh, they're looking for a communicator." You know, I even decided, remember telling them that your service is so bad, I don't fly your airline. Actually, I fly BA. You know. Now, somebody they said, "No, don't say that," because they may say, no, then you don't fly us. So I said, "I don't fly you because your service is bad."
Sure.
You know, so if you hire me, I will try and fix it. So they gave me the job. I had a meeting with the CEO and the deputy CEO, and I told them at that lunch to say, "You guys are so bad. You know, I don't even fly you much."
No, for me that's bold.
Yeah. But it took me 5 months before I could communicate about that airline, even after getting there.
100%.
Because I needed to learn first before I started talking. Because remember, the people who are writing about the airline have been writing about the airline for 20 years. So you actually can't tell them anything new,
Sure.
unless you know your story. You know? So I took time. I was appointed in about February. My first press conference was in June. So I took time to learn the airline and so on. By the time I called the media for a lunch to introduce myself, and so I could answer their questions already.
Sure. What would you say was the biggest challenge in that 5 month span?
Not really. There wasn't much a challenge except you needed to learn the airline, because the airline has a range of departments and interventions. So there's safety, there's security, there's customer care. You know, SAA used to have something called Voyager, which is a loyalty program. Those are the things that if you went on radio to talk about SAA, people will call about that, to complain about. Oh, this is a very terrible, you know, airline, or this poor leg room.
Sure.
So you need to know all those things before you even get to the technical side.
Sure.
Of the flight itself. You know, how many flights you know, take off and land in a particular day. How does the cabin crew work, etc. Then destinations. Where do you fly to?
Sure.
So in that 5 months, I had to learn all of that stuff, including going around the world to see where our offices are around the world. So get onto a plane, go to London, go to New York, go to wherever, and then compare with other airlines. Part of what I had to do, I don't remember the timeline exactly, but it was to fly other airlines
And see how they operate.
and compare to say, this is where we're missing it. There's this airline. So that was good. That's why when I was talking now, I said that was one of the biggest career moves,
Sure.
which were most interesting, because, you know, I got to do a range of things. in that short space of time that I was with the airline, not just communications. I ended up in charge of customer care, in charge of airports, in charge of, even airline security. At some point, the people who were doing airline security were reporting to me, but don't please don't ask how that happened. But, in this kind of executive jobs, it's all about leadership.
Sure.
It's never about the subject matter. It's about can you lead and get people to do what they're supposed to do, get specialists to thrive in what they are
good at.
What they are good at.
I see. And then you spent that time at the Airways. What happens after that? How do you make the switch into government?
No, I didn't really go to government.
Right?
After that, I went to private sector. Because remember, the airline is actually a parastatal.
Sure.
So you're still within the government sector, really. So I went to run my own business. I was CEO of a communications company that used to produce publications. Actually, it was his core business. In fact, his core business was to produce annual reports of companies, of listed companies. It was quite an interesting kind of thing. Before I went to work for another private sector company that was in the electronics called Altron, big company in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Before going into politics, that's when I went into party politics.
Yes.
And then after party politics, went back now to run my own business, which I've been doing since 2010.
I see. If we can touch on that business element, right?
Yes.
What was the first initial desire to start your own company?
Sometimes business is out of need. So finished my studies, looking for any job whatsoever. And I realized, what do I know that it can turn into a business? I realized, I don't know much. But I've been a student leader since 1989.
Sure.
And now it's 1997. So I've good experience in being a student leader. I've been a student leader in the church, in the youth, on campus.
Sure, SRC, yeah.
On SRCs, as vice president, as president twice.
Sure.
So I said, no, that's what I know. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go and train other leaders and charge them.
Sure.
So create a business where we go, we train leaders. Once you're in the SRC, we train you. This is how to be a president of the SRC. This is how to be a treasurer. This is how to be a secretary. And we wrote down and created manuals. In fact, there's a book. My first book was looking at SRC constitutions, which I co-authored with the fellow who was the competition commissioner, a fellow called Tembingos. So we wrote our first book like that. But we took this book now, we used it to train students.
Sure.
So I used to go around the country and say to an SRC, we're going to charge you 2,000 rand in those days or something. And I come and spend the weekend with your SRC and so on. And then I recruited fellow SRC guys, the guys who used to work with me. And I knew that this one was good as being a treasurer, so I say, I'm
going to play that role.
Yeah, you train them on how to become a good treasurer. You train them how to be a secretary. I train them how to be a good president. Train them how to run meetings. Basic things you may think are basic, but if you don't know where to start, they don't become basic.
Sure.
So that was my first business. The first business was actually a training business.
Sure. To train other leaders.
Yeah, while I'm waiting for a real job, I did that. They knew that this weekend I'm in Durban. In fact, when I got a call to say I got my job, I was in a training in Durban.
Sure.
At what was called ML Salten Technical. I don't know what it's called now. I think it's called Durban University of Technology.
Sure.
And I got a call to say, hey, you're starting on Monday. So I abandoned that and went to go and do my first real job.
Sure.
But in between, my first business was that. So that business carried on for 10 years.
I see.
Between 1996 and 2006, that business carried on. Even though I had a full-time job, I still had this side hustle. Where in between weekends we go and train
Yeah.
student leaders.
I want to touch on that because it seems like there's a lot of people, especially in old times, where they don't have the luxury to just do the side hustle. In this day and age, we abandon everything and it's like, yo man, I'm gonna follow my passion. I don't care
Yeah.
who does what, you know? And sometimes maybe people are a little bit more privileged to do so. How was the balance for you in now you have this opportunity, and we'll talk about the job that you got, but how was the balancing act? How was that for you in terms of the side hustle and still having to look for a job, look for something that traditionally is what you need to do as an adult?
Yeah. No, look, I mean, for me it was not a balance of that nature because there was nothing else.
Sure.
When I started this business, you know. And when I then got a formal job in government, I couldn't abandon this because it was done out of passion.
Sure.
And we created it as a form of an NGO then, so that it became more of a public good business rather than just for profit.
Sure.
So I could continue it even though I had a full-time job. All I needed to do was to declare to my superiors that, by the way, I've got this thing
This idea.
on the side that I'm doing. So if you say what was the balance, it was not an issue for me. I could do both. It was a question of time management and being able to know to make sure that it doesn't interfere with what your main job is, because the main job was already hectic by itself.
Sure.
To work for a minister is one of the most busiest. It's a nightmare because he could just wake up and say, oh, by the way, we're going to be in India for the next week, you come with me.
Sure.
So if you had planned other things in the country, you are out of the country for a week, so it means that
Everything you planned is.
if your side hustle was a one-man show,
Sure.
then it would fail, because then you suddenly you are in New York for a week, because you are governed by the timetable of your principal.
Sure.
It's important that at some point, obviously, you can grow your side hustle to be the main thing you are doing. But it's not an easy thing. There are people always say, "Oh, I'll go on my own," and so that's nice if you just say.
Sure.
But
to
you
do
need
it.
you need to prepare for it. You can't just wake up and say you're going to go on your own. Can you pay your own salary for the next 6 months? Can you pay people who are working for you?
Sure.
Yeah.
So then, how important would you say then is obviously delegation? Because now you had to leave your side hustle to somebody, the people that you had trained in these different roles.
Yeah.
As a leader, as a business owner, delegation becomes important because we have a lot of businesses in this day and age that are surrounded by one person. The magic is around one person. And if that person is not there, there is a bit of a situation where now the business fails.
Yeah. No, I think it's important to pick your partners very well, because I've been lucky in that I've always had sort of very good business partners.